Uh, is it going live? Okay. So welcome all once again. We are in second Kanshi Ram lecture series, and today it is a good fortune. We have Dr. Nethrapal Singh with us. But before I introduce him, I would like to hand over the session to Dr. Suraj Yengde. Over to you, Dr. Suraj Yengde. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, Jai Bhim, for joining this important session. We are here to learn why study Kanshi Ram, and we have a very good speaker who comes with a lot of recommendations and experience. So we are very honored. As we know, we are trying to learn more about Kanshi Ram's philosophy, his political work, his social movements, how he organized. There are many facets of Kanshi Ram who governed from being on the fringes of India's political power and yet ruled with his own style of working in India's caste society. And when you read and experience Kanshi Ram's work, there are so many exciting aspects that the current generation is unfortunately unaware of. Much of the information is given to them by somebody. And so we thought, why not just curate such sessions? So Professor Nethrapal Singh is our guest speaker today. We are organizing a series of lectures to invite people, experts, people who have worked with Kanshi Ramji, people who have had long experience, if not with Kanshi Ramji, the organizations he started. So today is the second in the series. We are very honored to welcome Professor Nethrapal Singh. We will ask him to speak for 50 minutes, and then we'll open up for Q&A. The Q&A has to be written down. We will not allow you to ask questions vocally, but it has to be written down. And once that is done, we will invite Professor Nethrapal Singh to respond to some of those questions. So I request Dr. Prashant Ingole to introduce our speaker today, and then hand over mic to Dr. Nethrapal Singh. Thank you, Jai Bhim.
Thank you, Suraj, once again. Today we have eminent scholar with us, Dr. Nethrapal Singh. But let me briefly introduce him before handovering this session to him. He has completed his PhD from Jamia Millia University in 2020, and currently he is with the Department of History, Motilal Nehru College, Delhi University, and he is in the social activism from last 10 to 20 years, and he is one of uh, I emphasize the scholar who is having in-depth knowledge about the working of Kanshi Ram and the Bojan movement. And since he is not armchair scholar only, he is also active on ground. So we'll get both the perspective from this talk, I believe. So Professor Nethrapal Singh, over to you on the topic how to understand Kanshi Ram. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both of you, Suraj and Prashant. And giving me this opportunity to share with you the ideas about our one of the greatest leader, Manyava Kanshi Ram. Actually, when you have suggested this topic, that how to understand Kanshi Ram, basically the question is important not only to understand, but the important question is, or the topic may be suitable, is that how I understood Kanshi Ram. That is, I think, more important. And though I do not, speak much, but I have been persuaded some of my friends to speak about this great leader, a contemporary great leader. So as to understand him, or you can say how I understood him. Basically, that is to understand Manavar Kanshi Ram is to understand before him to understand Baba Saheb Ambedkar. And both these, the great scholars, social reformers, political reformers, and even to the religious reformers also, that their ideas, their philosophy is not just to read and write, it is to practice. And those who practice their ideas, their philosophy, their ideas, how to run the movement, and how to build the social and political movement for social transformation and economic emancipation. Then if I go into the ideas of Baba Saheb Ambedkar, then I think the Kanshi Ramji was the person after Baba Saheb Ambedkar who appropriated him rightly. Because the first phase is to understand Baba Saheb Ambedkar, then is to implement, and then the third stage is the stage of the people like us or the current generation. So to understand Kanshi Ramji, first we have to theoretically understand Baba Saheb Ambedkar, then we can understand his movement, because he was a pragmatic leader. Going into the ideas, I was reading one of the editorials written by Manavar Kanshi Ramji in 1982. As I said, that to understand Kanshi Ram, we have to understand the life of Baba Saheb Ambedkar, how he worked, how actually he organized, the missionary funding, how he had given the ideas, and that in that, the editorials, he used to run a newspaper that was called Oppressed Indian. Then he said that there were many people when he started working initially in late 1960s and early 70s. Then primarily the people from Maharashtra used to ask him why Kanshi Ram should not run a Buddhist organization. Then he had replied briefly in that 1.5 page editorial. He said that if a organization is a social organization, that it must be apolitical and non-religious. If an organization is a political organization, then it must be asocial and non-religious. And then if a organization is a religious organization, it must be asocial and apolitical. And generally what we do basically when we work on the ground, there are many the people, the missionaries, the functionaries, those who are working at ground. Basically they commit mistake, and he learned from the mistake which was committed by the lieutenants of Baba Saheb Ambedkar after him. So he said, I am running a social organization, because that time he was running BAMSEF. And BAMSEF is a social organization of the backward class and minorities, employees federation, which was known as but basically the educated employees of backward class and minorities. Then that time it is a social organization, how to create social awareness. And later on he formed DS4 Dalit Sosit Sanghar Samiti. And then in 1984 he formed Bahujan Samaj Party. So if we go back to the life of Baba Saheb Ambedkar, that Baba Saheb Ambedkar, how evolved himself and how he evolved the ideas, how he brought this the society from negativity to positivity. Then one thing we have to learn, that Baba Saheb Ambedkar introduced the first newspaper that was called Mook Nayak. And then after Mook Nayak, he introduced another paper that was called Bahiskarat Bharat. And then after Bahiskarat Bharat, Baba Saheb Ambedkar had another paper named Janta. And then at last he had a newspaper called Prabuddh Bharat. So we see the evolution from Mook Nayak. Mook Nayak means the leader of voiceless. Then when voiceless started speaking, they were Bahiskarat. They were discriminated or they were boycotted, social boycotted. And then these such, the Baiskarat people, they, formed them into as masses. And then mass has to, convert after education that, the Prabhu, the enlightened India, which he had. If you see, the Baba Sahib Ambedkar's life that he formed in 1924, Baiskarat Hitkarni Sabha. Then he formed in 1936 the All India Independent Labour Party. Then in 1942, he formed All India Scheduled Caste Federation. And at the end of his life in 1955, he formed, though he could not launch, RPI, Republican Party of India. Then we can see, how he had evolved, the ideas of political organization. And then in 1956, he formed, the Buddhist Society of India. So he found first social organization, Baiskarat Hitkarni Sabha, then political organization, then he moved to religious organization. And Baba Sahib Ambedkar, had given the direction how to work, as Manavar Kanshi Ram Sahib has written in 1982 that how an organization must be run and how it must not be run. If it is a social organization, then we have to keep in mind that it must be apolitical and non-religious. If it is political, then it must be asocial and non-religious. If it is religious organization, then it must be asocial and apolitical. It has, its politics, but it's not direct politics. And Baba Sahib Ambedkar, had given the very famous slogan, the mantra, that in 1924, that educate, agitate, and organize. So the very important question is how to educate. And I think the educate means that first we have to educate ourselves. And how we have to educate? We have to educate ourselves through social organization, through social movement. Then we can understand how the society works, how it functions, what are the contradictions of, the caste-based society. Then we can understand them better. After, understanding, developing an understanding of the Indian social system or Indian caste system, or, then we develop, certain kind of agitation within ourselves. And that agitation is related to inequality, discrimination, depression, exploitation. That naturally a sensitive person, an intelligent person is bound to get agitated. And a person who is agitated, then he can only think about how to organize. So you also remember that Baba Sahib has written two important books, how to understand this Indian society. Then he had written in 1916 when he was in America, he was doing MA. Then he had written Castes in India. Then in 1936, he had written, the Annihilation of Caste. So he had developed, this, very deep understanding of how caste functions in India. What is the source of their genesis? What is the source of their mechanism? What is the sources of, their functions? And later on, he had developed the idea, how to annihilate caste. So Manavar Kanshi Ram Sahib also, have given a thought. And learning from his life experience, he moved in a way, the way Baba Sahib Ambedkar has moved. As I told you that he formed the first social organization, that Kanshi Ram also formed BAMSIF. It was a purely social organization to aware, the people of this Bahujan Samaj. Then he had formed, the Dalit Soshit Sanghar Samiti in 1982. Later on, it was named, the another organization that was known Bahujan Volunteer Force. Particularly, focusing on the youth, how to train that youth to protect the interest of their society when it comes to agitation or protest. And then he formed, the Bahujan Samaj Party, that was a political organization. And what was actually the line? First, I have, heard from many missionaries, those who have worked with Manevar Kanshi Ram Saab, that he read the Baba Sahib's book Caste in India, I think 7 times in a night. Or several times he had, given, references in many of his speeches, those have been collected, the newspaper which he used to run in Bahujan Sangtak. So Manavar Kansiram Saab also, I have information about 3 newspapers. First, he had Operas Indian for primarily focusing on, the English educated employees. That how to spread his message, beyond, the Hindi belt, those who know Hindi, and particularly in South India or outside India. Then he has Bahujan Times and the Bahujan Sangtak. So somebody has asked a question that what is the reference? I'll talk later about references. Though he has in newspaper, basically it was the mouthpiece of Bahujan Samaj Party. So his speeches basically were published in Bahujan Sangtak, and they have been compiled by the many missionary people. Now they are also available. So the question is that Baba Sahib Ambedkar had his mission in his life. And if we go back to Baba Sahib's speech on 25th November 1949, a day before he had gifted the draft constitution to the Constituent Assembly. And in the Constituent Assembly, he delivered his speech on 25th November 1949. And what he said that from now onwards, we are entering into the era of contradictions. And what is the counterpart of the contradiction? He said that from political point of view, we all are equal. But from the point of view of social and economic point, there is a social and economic inequality exists in India. So we must work to eradicate poverty and to destroy this, caste-based social discrimination. Social inequality and economic inequality must be, destroyed or removed from India. So this basically was a mission. So how to, eradicate, how to annihilate caste, and how to eradicate poverty, because whom Manavar Kanshi Ram Saab was talking about, that society, particularly the Bahujan Samaj, primarily he said the scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, other backward classes, and religious minorities. Basically, they still suffer from caste discrimination, and they are the sufferer of poverty. So how to remove that? That is why Baba Sahib Ambedkar, had made a focus in the Constitution on fundamental rights and the directive principles of the state policy. So therefore, Baba Sahib had given a direction to himself and to his followers and to his lieutenant that in what direction they have to work. And I think Kanshi Ram Sahib had, embraced this properly. And to achieve this mission, because annihilation of caste and eradication of poverty is a mission for the Bahujan missionaries and Bahujan functionaries. So how to achieve that mission? Baba Sahib Ambedkar had told a path in 1946. In 1942, he was having the 2 days All India Scheduled Caste Federation at Lucknow on 24th and 25th April. So in that conference, he had given certain direction of how to do politics or how to develop political movement and political organization. So in that conference, Baba Sahib Ambedkar had told that what should be the future path of our politics or our social and political movement. He said that if we have to overcome the social and economic problems at national level, at pan-India level, then we must organize under one leader, one party, and one program. So how to achieve that, the target, how to achieve that how can we build how can we develop a leadership at the national level? How can we develop a party, political organization, and how can we have one national program under which the entire Bahujan Samaj, the communities which are more than 6,000, how they can organize under one program, one party, and one leadership. Manevar Kanshi Ram Saab, is from the very beginning, he started working to achieve this target or this mission or to achieve this objective. That is why his greatest, the achievement is that in his lifetime, he was able to develop a national leadership, and he was able to build a national level organization, political organization, social organization, either in the form of BAMSAFE. BAMSAFE was formed, established at the national level. And then he had, the Bahujan Samaj Party, and I think in 1996, Bahujan Samaj Party got, the national recognition and became the third largest party in India. Still, it is. But the question is that by developing this one leadership, one leader, one party, and one program, the question is how to run this program and how to strengthen this organization. There are some very important questions. The first, we must understand that the organization, either it is political organization or it is social organization, the first motive is to educate socially, politically. Because both the BAMSAFE and the BSP, they are social and political organizations. So these organizations primarily are meant, which I have understood, they are meant for educating the Bahujan Samaj, the people of scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, other backward classes, and religious minorities. And they are also being meant for giving the political education, because by participating in electoral process, it's not just to win and lose the elections, rather it is also a political education, which is not available either in any university or in a school or in colleges. Because when people work under that organization, they learn so many things. They interact with people, they manage fund, they talk, they raise the issues. They sometimes they develop the organization, they develop the protest, how to speak. That it's basically it's a political education, and it also basically clarifies the minds of the Bahujan Samaj that to whom they have to go. And on this front, the another greatest contribution of Manavar Kanshi Ram is that he taught what is the importance of vote. By building, developing Bahujan Samaj Party, he taught that what is the importance of vote. And Baba Saheb Ambedkar also had, said after he had, after completing, the constitution, he said that one thing is more important than this constitution, and that is the right to vote. And we must use this vote for ourselves, not for others. But what was happening before Kanshi Ramji, that we were using this vote not for us, but for others. But Kanshi Ram has developed the confidence, the self-belief that if we use this vote for ourselves, then we can transform ourselves, the society, and we can transform the political system, and we can implement, the fundamental rights and the directive principles for social transformation, for economic emancipation. And in many, the speeches he used to deliver either in rallies or in, the cadre programs, he used to tell people that we must protect the vote like we protect, our daughters. If the respect of a daughter is gone, then the entire respect of a society also goes to other hands. Similarly, he compared the vote, that vote is like a daughter for us. if we can keep intact, if we can protect vote, then we can protect the dignity, the self-respect of our society. Because we have experienced that by giving vote to others, we have not been respected. We have no self-respect. You can see in newspapers, in televisions, that how many cases of atrocities are being reported. And primarily with this society. And that's why he used to say in हिंदी में कहते थे कि जिस कौम का राजा होता है वही कौम ताजा होती है. That is why Baba Sahib Ambedkar has given a dream that we have to become a ruling class. And in 1942 in Lucknow, he said that we must become a third balancing political power. If not the first and the second, we must become third balancing political power. And that balancing political power was able to, by recognizing the importance of vote. But the fundamental question is that how to run this organization. That in the one book is published, the edited by Manohar Ate from Maharashtra. That is the editorials of Kanshi Ram. So in one of the editorials, Manavar Kanshi Ram Sahab had written a editorial by naming that how to revive and survive Ambedkarism in India. So he tried to find out certain questions at the initial stage, that how Baba Sahib Ambedkar was managing, the missionary fatigue, and how he was able to revive and survive the movement. It's not only the question that how we can revive, but there is also important question how to survive. That is why he made a plan, that he tried to develop a think tank in the form of the educated employees and the officers of the Samaj, and then DS4 or BVF, and then Bahujan Samaj Party. So I think he tried to develop a think tank, and the Reserve Bank and the Power Bank. So what he said that the employees, the three things are necessary if we go, the practical level or they at the ground. That he said that to run the movement, the karma, you take the karma of Baba Sahib Ambedkar ahead. We need three important things, and there are three T's: T1, T2, and T3. The T1 is talent, and T2 is treasure, and T3 is time. That to run any movement, time, talent, and treasure are very necessary. And with this, the fourth element is desire. That T1 into T2 into T3 plus desire is equal to social change or social transformation. So he found that that because of the Baba Sahib's movement or Phule Sahib Ambedkar's movement, a great number of the educated employees were produced, but they were scattered at India, the national level. So how to bring them under one umbrella? How to use that talent? And those who were employees, the officers, they also had, the getting salary, per month salary. So they had also the treasure with them. So that was an initial idea, but time was also needed. So he found that because the employees were not having time, that is why where is another area, what is another component of society, those who are having other two T's, time and talent. So he found that there is a Bahujan youth, educated Bahujan youth, particularly the students who used to go to the schools, colleges, and the universities. But they are not in employment or in services. So they have another two T's. They have talent and they have time. So if they are clubbed together, then they can reach to the masses, which generally lives in the remote areas, rural areas, or particularly in the cities, in slum areas. And the real power basically lies with them because they have votes. The educated employees are nearly, they are fewer in numbers. And same is the story. And if we go to the research, then they call that employees are nearly 5%. and youth is 15%, and rest, the masses of the Samaj are about 85%. And the 85% are having votes. So if we reach to them, make them aware, then he had developed a formula that if they both are together, then they can, and if they have desire, that how to develop the desire, he also had certain programs. So if they reach to the Bahujan, the masses of Bahujan Samaj, then they can transform their life, both from the point of view of social and economic. Naturally, the religious aspect is there, as at the end of Baba Sahib Ambedkar has, given us a direction that in which direction we have to go spiritually or religiously. But before going to reach to that point, we have to cross these two stages. And I, remember that in volume 3, Baba Sahib Ambedkar writings and speeches, that he had written two important chapters. Baba Sahib Ambedkar had written two important chapters. One is the trump of Brahmanism, and another is the decline and fall of Buddhism. So Baba Sahib Ambedkar has said that who can do a missionary work? And he told two qualifications. One is the qualification that a person, he is interested doing missionary work, he must not have private property in his name. And then he must not have family. A person who is not having property in his name and who is not having his family, he can do tremendous missionary work. Therefore, Buddha also has, developed the Sangha, and in Sangha, those who used to become bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, these two important conditions are applied on them. These were the two important qualifications, that they must not have their family and they must not have private property to their name. Because if they do have, then they have to save their families, then they have to save their property. And I think Manavar Kanshi Ram Sahib had learned this lesson from Baba Sahib Ambedkar's, the message. And he took the pledge in 1960s that he will not have even a single rupee in his name, and he will not be having his family. There are many other, pledges, but these two were important, and we see the impact a person can make. That is why he became, the Kanshi Ram. Today we know him because he thoroughly, truly, basically, accepted the message what Baba Sahib Ambedkar has delivered. And the third important thing which I would like to, mention, that is basically, there are a lot of confusions among our missionaries and functionaries. As I told you that they have a confusion, they generally mix the social work with political work and the political work with religious work. That is why they reach nowhere. If we do not have a clear direction, clear-cut vision, then we are bound to get confused. And if we are confused, then we are bound to confuse others also. And confusing others, is the greatest sin. Because if I am not clear, then I'm making others confused. And that is, I think, the greatest obstacle. So before entering into, this great movement, we must try to understand or have a clear vision that how to work and how not to work. And Manavar Kanshi Ram Sahib also said that I have learned how to run this movement from Baba Sahib Ambedkar. And I have learned how not to run this movement from the lieutenants of Baba Sahib. Because they had committed mistakes, mixing the social work with political and political work with religious and religious with social and political. That is why they had learned nowhere. And the great movement of Baba Sahib Ambedkar, was failed after his death. So you learn that message, that how not to run the movement and how to run the movement. The point which I would like to, focus here, that is that, there is a fashion right now among basically those who are well off from scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and other backward classes. They are running towards the running the religious organizations, primarily the Buddhist organization. They are developing Buddha Vihara. That is good, but they must not be politicized. They must not do the politics. They must do the religious work. They must to educate. They must, build the characters of Buddha and Baba Sahib Ambedkar and many other social reformers and the great saints. But generally, it is an observation that Baba Sahib Ambedkar has written that the caste is a bad breath of Indian society, and we must not bring this bad breath to the Buddhism also. That if we bring the same bad breath to Buddhism, then what is the importance? What is the use? And generally, it also was observed by Manavar Kanshi Ram that people, on the one hand, they were talking about Buddhism, but on the other hand, they were practicing caste. And if we do practice caste in that same manner, then there is no difference. That is why what he said, Baba Sahib Ambedkar also had written in the volume 3rd, particularly in the chapter, The Decline and Fall of Buddhism. He said that Buddhism was declined because it lost the protection of the state, or it lost the protection of the government. So what Kanshi Ram Sahib was doing, Kanshi Ram was saying that first, we must have our government, we must have political power in our hand. Then if we have political power in our hand, if we have state our control, then we can protect, we can spread Buddhism. Because to spread Buddhism, the Buddhist philosophy or the idea of Buddha, we must enlighten people. And how to produce the enlightened people, the enlightened students, the intellectuals cannot be produced without resources. And particularly the resources, the material and natural resources. Because to train the monks, to train the intellectuals, to develop an educated class, the enormous amount of resources are required. So from where we will get resources? That is why he said, and we have to wait until we capture power. But there are many who disagree with this. But I think he was right in his direction, and he said that he was having his the calculation that by 2006 the Bahujan Samaj Party or the Bahujan Samaj will be at the center. But he could not fulfill his promise. That is why I think he left us in 2006. And he said, I will go to Buddhism like Baba Sahib Ambedkar went. That I want to go with Buddhism as the Prime Minister of this country. I say Prime Minister of a country goes to the Buddha Saran or the Sangha Saran or the Dhamma Saran, then the crores and crores of people will follow him. And we can transform this society. So he was having that develop that idea until we tasted power to an extent. So he had developed his self-belief that before Kanshi Ram Sahib, the people used to say, हम ये काम नहीं कर सकते, या महाराष्ट्र में कहते हो शकत नहीं, नॉर्थ इंडिया में कहते ये हो नहीं सकता, और people used to say that Kanshi Ram is a madman. Generally, I remember many people. Then he develop the confidence that by implementing, by embracing, by understanding Baba Sahib Ambedkar, truly we can transform this society. We can have our MPs and MLAs, we can have our chief ministers. And he did that in his life. He proven that when he was alive, that he was able to produce, the MLAs, member of legislative assemblies, MLCs in many states. And he was able to produce, the many member of parliament, and to even the chief minister of Uttar Pradesh also. So the people got confidence that yes, we can do that. And that developing that confidence was developed at the cost of his sacrifice. In not only the sacrifice, he also convinced the lakhs and lakhs of people across the country to make sacrifice like him. And he was appealing, repeatedly that we have to become a society of thinking, that how to think, we must become a, कहते हैं ना, सोचने समझने वाला समाज बनना बहुत जरूरी है. And our society, the Bahujan Samaj is not a society which generally thinks, because they are engaged in, the labor work, they are engaged in the physical work. Those who are engaged in physical work, they have, very less time to think. But, a class, however a small class has developed, who can think rightly, who can pay back to society, the people like us. I became a professor because of the reservation, because Baba Saheb Ambedkar, Kanshi Ram Saheb had fought that we have to get admissions into the schools and the colleges and the universities. So naturally, we are enjoying this life at the cost of our society, because the share was fixed. So it is our natural responsibility that we have to pay back it. So that is why he ran the program Payback to Society. And he convinced the people that you are enjoying this life, those who become administrator, professors, the in third class and fourth class and first class and second grade B and grade C services, grade A services. He convinced them, and first he set his example. And I remember, there are many stories of his life. I remember one thing that he was in Hoshiarpur. Hoshiarpur is the home district, while he was running this organization. And that time, I think he was member of parliament. He became member of parliament in 1991 from Ottawa. So he was staying, I read this, the anecdote in Bahujan Sangtak. He was staying in the state guest house in Hoshiarpur. So he was sleeping, and suddenly he told that I got up. And I remember, my father used to work in the same guest house, and that guest house was actually district magistrate's house earlier. So I was staying, and I came, suddenly in the night to see my father, because those time the electricity was not there. Then his father used to, run a fan that was basically hand blown fan. If the district magistrate was sleeping, then his sleep must not get disturbed. So I remember to see that he's told that I used to come to, deliver food, lunch to my father. And I used to ask my father, can I, blown by my hand? His father used to tell that, no, you cannot do, because this is my duty. So I remember that if my father is not, running that hand blown fan, and he said that, I'm staying at that guest house where my father was a worker. And it is because that, it is because of Baba Saheb Ambedkar's movement. It is because of that I had a belief in Baba Saheb's philosophy, Baba Saheb methods, Baba Saheb techniques, Baba Saheb, the tactics, Baba Saheb ideas. That now I am staying in a guest house where my father could not dream even to enter, that where district magistrate used to live. That's now I am staying, and I am actually the guest of the state right now. If we think in such a way, implement his ideas to understand, to grab him, I think we will be able to transform his life. Not only our life, even the life of the millions of people. As Baba Saheb Ambedkar said in 1956, while he was going to embrace Buddhism, so he delivered a speech. And I remember, there's some message from that speech. Baba Saheb Ambedkar said that if we raise ourselves, then we will raise humanity. And if we raise humanity, that will be the greatest work, because the work of our great ancestors, either Baba Saheb Ambedkar or Kanshi Ram, basically this is a tradition from the time of Buddha, to Kabir, to Ragdas, to Phule, to Nanak, to Dadu, to Chokha Mela, to Phule, to Sahu, to Periyar, Narayana Guru, Baba Saheb Ambedkar, Kanshi Ram, and there are, the many others about whom we know very less. So that is a great, greatest tradition. that if we became the part of that tradition, and that is the tradition of the emancipation, that is the tradition of the humanitarian work, that is the tradition to reach the humanity. So I think there are many lessons at the ground that if we implement, then we can run the movement of Baba Sahib Ambedkar, Phule, Sahu, Periyar, and even the Kanshi Ram in a right direction. So I think there are many things to share with you, but I think I would end my, the lecture here. And before ending it up, I would like to share with you one small story, because sometimes stories basically, convey the right message. So what I would like to, I was reading a story, and that story was that there was a villager, there was a farmer in a village. He was a very poor farmer, but because of his hard work, he, earned a lot of money. And he became older than, and he think that now his life is short. Then he was worried. He was having two sons. So he called both of the sons and he told them that if you have to live a healthy, happy life, then you must do three things in your life. The first thing, that you must have a good sleep. Second is that you must have a good food. And third, that you must have a house in every village. So after, the boys basically, they were enjoying their life, but they forgot how to do this. And after a few days, that farmer was died. So both the sons, they were puzzled that what to do. And he divided the property equally, between both of them. So the one son, basically what he started doing, he started buying, the good beds and the utensils in the house, and he used to sleep. And he was having good food, a very healthy food every day. And after a few days, that he also developed the stomach ache and the problem. And then he also ordered his, the contractor to construct, the houses in nearby villages. But after, the few days or few months, his whole wealth, his whole money was basically lost. And then he started cursing his father, that what kind of the teaching my father told to me, that I've been trying to have a good sleep, but I am not able to sleep. Then I'm trying to have a good food, but now I cannot eat a good food. And my money is also lost. He told me that to build a house in every village. But there was another son. He was puzzled. He was confused what to do. He was having no, the right direction. Then he started following the life of his father. What he started doing, he used to get early in the morning. He used to go to the farm, his farm, and he used to work. And he used to come at the night, and he had a good sleep. And then when he used to work hard, then a day came that there was a time of harvesting. Then in the morning, early morning, they went and they worked throughout the day, and in the evening they came. And there was nothing. There was only a very, the few food was left. So they were feeling, both of the husband and wife feeling hungry, and they started eating that food. Then it became so tasty. Then he understood the first message, that if we do the hard work, then food became tasty. And he slept. And then he got up early in the morning, so he was so fresh. And the second message, the teaching he learned from his father, that it is that if we do hard work and have good food, then we can have a good sleep. But there was a third question which he could not, was not getting the answer. Then he went to sell, his crop to the town Mandi, and then he got late. So he thought that I should stay in a dharamsala, basically the rented, the rented place. So when he went to that dharamsala to stay at night, then he saw that, there was a friend, and he was actually the owner of that dharamsala. So his friend was so happy, and he told him that why to stay in dharamsala in rented house. So you come to my own house, then we will have. So they had celebration because his friend met him after so many years. And when in the morning, he was about to leave. His mother was there, father was there. Then uh, his friend's mother told, uh, "Dear son, this is your house. Whenever you come to the town, you please come here. It is your own house." Then he understood that it is our good behavior, the good thoughts that they develop basically the relationship. Wherever we go, there is our own house. And I think Manavar Kansiram Saab basically, learned these lessons from Baba Sahib Ambedkar, and he practiced them. So while we practice, while we work as a missionary or as a functionary, then we get, the true message, of our great, the great leaders, great ancestors. So I think we must do practice, not only sitting in libraries and reading new, the books. It's not enough. They are, the essential part to grab the ideas, to understand the ideas. But those ideas only, can be understood truly when we basically work in a field. Because, the Baba Sahib Ambedkar or Kansaram, they basically were not armchair thinkers. Whatever they have written out of the experience of their life. So I think I should thank you and Javim, all those who are listening me, for giving me this opportunity to share, some of the ideas with you. So thank you very much. And if you have some questions, we can please carry on.
Thank you so much, Professor Nethrapal, for your lecture. You covered so many topics, and I think there are um, so many references that you also gave, especially Kanshi Ramji's editorials that you see are a good resource to look at. And also Manohar Ate's book, which is compilation of editorials, which also we should look at. And one of the ways to understand writings is to see their relevance to our life. I remember maybe it was Vaman Meshram or somebody I think it was him who had come to America. In one of the discussion, he said that the book of Baba Sahib Ambedkar is a guidance for missionaries. So some people read the same book and they may get some information. But if movement missionaries are reading, they may get a missionary guidance in that book. And with what you were presenting to us, the same text of revolution and counter-revolution in India and what it means and how it conveys a certain message to our grounded reality contemporarily was very important, and it was illuminating uh, uh, the uh, the existential topics that we are currently discussing. You also told us about the brief resume. I think one point that came very important, and I think this absence of clarity is because, as you said very rightly, that sochne samajhne wala samaj, the 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 society, the community that can think and that can decipher or assess the situation by themselves. Now, not many of us have that privilege, but many of us should do. And I think if that is basically the idea of enlightened India, the Prabuddha Bharat, that the mission of Baba Sahib was to reorient and bring back to India. And also how the three wings of organizations that dominate our life. One is social, second political, and the third is religious. And they are interconnected, but they should exist independent of each other, because then there is a beauty to each working, and it is the same work anywhere we go in the world. the society, especially organizationally, is divided, so everybody can do their effective task in their own domain, and so then they can complement each other into a smooth functioning of society. And this happens in any company. If you're running a company, you have a team of human resources, you have a team of managers who are looking over projects, you have a team of, let's say, marketeers, you have a team of people who do research. Everybody is doing their work and they meet to discuss the ideas. Oftentimes people think, why is this excluded and why is that excluded? It reminds that when even Suresh Mane sir last 2 weeks ago had explained why after formation of BAMSAFE, Kanshi Ram ji focused on BSP because he wanted to maintain those uh, the work of independence. He wanted to now focus on the political aspect, and so he was doing. And I think that was very important clarity. I would like to also ask you a couple of questions, and we also have few questions. I invite the audience members to write down their questions. We will direct them to Professor Singh for his commentary. One, uh, there are two questions rather in this. You gave the reference of Babasaheb Ambedkar saying that we need to become the third balancing power.
Yes.
Could you quickly say what year it was?
It was in 1946, I think. He was having a conference, 2 days
Okay.
conference of All India Scheduled Caste Federation, and that is published in volume 17, part 3rd. It starts from page number 283. There is the entire speech has been published in that volume 17, Baba Sahib Ambedkar Writings and Speeches.
Thank you. And I think this speech is also, I think, important for us to look back on. So
Yeah.
the question is as follows. Now, what we can see from Kanshi Ramji's lifestyle is he is very scientific, meaning he has formulas, he is making those the arithmetic calculations to come to a logical end, because logic usually follows a certain set of mathematical formulations. That's why logicians are most of the time mathematicians. And I think we can see why science is so convincing, because it follows the absoluteness. 1 + 1 = 2. I think that's how the logical end is. Can you comment briefly or uh, at your ease about why such approach is important, about the scientific approach to talk about a community development or emancipation or liberation? Because when we think about science, scientific methodological revolution in modern times, then people think about the revolutions of Lenin, who was inspired by Marx or Mao, the left kind of ideology, who also follows a certain scientific method. And then when you come to India, I don't know if there is any other person who will deal with this scientific necessities of societies to find a solution, but from Kanshi Ram. So can you comment on that? And if you know any other formulas that he may have given apart from time, talent, treasure, desire?
That why to think scientifically is important. If we remember, if you see, the tradition, starting from Buddha up to now, that Buddha was also scientific. He has, the four truth. And we read these truth in science from different names, because there is a cause, there is a problem, then problem, there is a cause of that problem, then there is an impact of that problem or effect of that problem, and there is a solution. Kanshi Ram Sahib, Baba Sahib Ambedkar was also very clear that there are two problems before us as we go scientifically and relate to the program. The program Baba Sahib Ambedkar gave to us, and Manavar Kanshi Ram was working on that. And that program, what is that program? The program is the program of social transformation and economic emancipation. And why social transformation was needed? Because there was a problem of caste. There was a problem of social inequality. There was a problem of economic inequality. So there was a formula that if there is a problem of social and economic problem, that what are the causes? We also have to look into, we also have to discover what are the causes. If we can discover the causes, then we can also know what are the impact of those problems and the causes. And then we can go rightly to the direction of solution. So if we read keenly the Baba Sahib Ambedkar, Kanshi Ram Sahib life, that life is very scientific life. So that formula is there. However, there are very few people, those who try to understand, the constitution and Baba Sahib mission in such a way that he identified problem, he identified the causes, and then what were the impact and what were the solutions. So Baba Sahib Ambedkar, if you read, the Baba Sahib Ambedkar writings, then he talk about problems, the causes. If you read the entire revolution and counter revolution, caste in India, annihilation of caste, either they read about small land holdings, economic aspect, labor aspect, he talk about. So what are the impact of the effect of the social and economic problem? There is an uneducation, illiteracy, the caste conflict, social violences, the discrimination on the basis of gender, sex. All these are problems. And why India is backward? So backward. So that was one formula. There was another formula which Kanshi Ram Sahab developed, and that was the formula of 15 or 85, the 15% and 85%. Because if when you talk about simply in simple words, that Bahujan Samaj is the 85% of this entire country. The population of Bahujan Samaj is 85%. And on the other hand, the society which is ruling this country, they are 15%. Then, suddenly it gives you an idea that it gives you the sense of empowerment, the sense of positivity, that we are more in number. If we are more in number, then we can, overcome, the existing rulers. And he also used to say that India is the only country in the world where minority is ruling over majority. Because now the population has come to less than 15%. That is why there are a lot of controversies going in India that there must be a caste-based census. And that demand is very old demand. That demand was raised in 2005 by Bahujan Samaj Party. It was actually a, the important, the issue in 2000 assembly elections in Uttar Pradesh. Then it was raised in 2009 General Assembly elections. There were a lot of hue and cry in 2011. But the governments, those who have been controlled by the three upper caste communities, namely the Brahman, the Kshatriyas, and the Baniyas, basically the Vaishyas, they are not basically ready to do that. But he had given a formula, and that formula is not only used by the Bahujan Samaj Party alone. Now there are many other regional parties, those who have been basically led by the Gair Brahmins. They are also using the such formula. So that was another formula. And this third formula was that it was time, talent, and treasure plus desire. Because these formulas are very simple to make a common man understand. That is why the great people, the great leaders, they simplify, the very complicated things into the simple manner so that a common man can understand. And Kanshi Ram Sahib was speaking in the language of common man, though he was, is a scientist in DRDO. But he knew that if I have to interact with the common people, then I have to simplify, I have to develop certain formula so that people can easily understand and they can stand up. They can speak. So he was giving it voice. A lot of many people now using the 85 और 15 का जो फॉर्मूला है कि 85 और इसके ऊपर बहुत सारे नारे भी स्लोगन्स भी डेवलप किए हैं उन्होंने. There are many other things. I think now I think I must not discuss all these things right now, but there are very the finer things. There are very few people basically know. that running this movement, it's not so easy as we think. What he was saying, that there was another formula he talked about, no, the four important things, particularly about caste. He had delivered a speech in Kuala Lumpur in 1998. That speech is also published. Because there was an international conference that was organized by the Indians, those who were living in Malaysia. So he was also being invited to that conference. And in that conference, he had delivered the important part is that he said that though I was so busy, I could not write my speech. So I am sorry for that. But he had delivered that how caste functions. He knows that Baba Sahib said that caste can be annihilated, and he told his his own methods. So he said that I have come to a conclusion, that I started thinking that what was actually the purpose of making caste. That if we understand the objective of making caste, then we can develop a plan how to annihilate this. And he said that caste was developed, caste was made to basically give benefits to certain communities. So they have made caste to enjoy certain privileges, enjoy certain the benefits. But there was, on the other hand, the majority people, those who were victim of this caste. If those victims, they get organized themselves, then they can defeat this purpose of the caste, because those who are actually the beneficiaries of caste system, then they themselves speak to destroy it. So how to make, and if you read Baba Sahib Ambedkar Annihilation of Caste, he was not focusing on the scheduled caste and scheduled tries to destroy this. He was trying to interact with others, that how you have to destroy this. So that is why he said four important things about caste to run this movement. One, that we must know the history of caste. Second, that we must know the psychology of caste. Third, we must know the sociology of caste. And fourth is we must know the geography of caste. A person who is knowing the psychology, history, sociology, and geography of a caste, then a person will be able to run this movement. Otherwise, they are bound to fail. Because the every caste is having different psychology. They have a different pattern of thinking. So we cannot simply apply a single formula. Every caste is having its own history. If you talk about Mas, the Marathas, the Jats, the Gujars, the Brahman, the Kshatriya, the Chamars, the Balmikis, they have their different history. So a person who is working as a missionary and as a functionary, they must know the history of caste. And there is also a sociology, because there is a ladder. As Baba Sahib Ambedkar said, that the caste system is a building without stairs. So there are layers. So we must know the sociology. And fourth one is the geography, because certain castes reside in certain areas. In certain areas, they are dominant. In certain areas, they are not dominant. So that is another important formula, about which there are many few those who pay attention, those who pay that the attention, that they must learn these things before becoming a functionary and a missionary of Bahujan movement. So these are certain things. I think I must stop here now, not to discuss too many things, and we can further move another question.
Okay, thank you. So there is a question by Anand Ratna Arun. He has asked two questions. We can join them together. So he asks, according to your reading, professor, and your reading and experience, which principles of running social, political, and religious movement changed from the times of Buddha, Ambedkar to Kanshi Ram? So I think the question is about what are the principles that are changing in the movement, and is economic emancipation not part of the Bahujan agenda? Because it is never mentioned. It's usually in the social, political, religious, those are the domains, but why is economy not part of it? So there are two questions. Why is economic emancipation not mainstream, I guess, and what are the principles that you see are changing?
As if you go back to Baba Sahib Ambedkar, principles never change. Principles remain the same. Only it is the strategy. Only it is the method. Basically, they change. And why I am saying that if we have to follow a principle, that if we have to emancipate ourselves, then we have to work for that. We cannot, remain on the. Others may help, but they cannot become your emancipate. And you know what Baba Sahib said in one of these speeches, that as a principle, when he was talking about, the organization, particularly that time Congress was in power. So Baba Sahib Ambedkar said that as a principle, I will not enter in any organization which is led by caste Hindus. This principle is very important principle. That if we have to emancipate ourselves, then we must have our own organization, own leadership, own resources, own think tank, own ideas, own strategies, own actions. So from the time of Buddha, the principle of social change, principles of individual change, principle of spiritual change, principles of economic change remain the same. But it's are basically the methods according to time, according to space, they may vary. Then there is another that part is that why the economic transformation agenda is not the main part of this movement. I think we miss out. And without the idea of economic emancipation, this entire movement is incomplete. Because what for we are building the political organizations just to get our share in physical and natural resources. Either they are in the form of job, they are in the form of land, they are in the form of factories, they are in the form of the business. That if we do not raise our economic status, then it's difficult to raise our social and spiritual status. You read Baba Sahib Ambedkar's writing, Baba Sahib elections manifestos in 1950s. He raised this question very, vigorously, the question, the issues of economic change. Either he was talking about land reform, either he was talking about eradication of poverty, either he was talking about, distribution of wealth. You read the manifestos because they are available in the Baba Sahib Ambedkar writings and speeches. Similarly, Kanshi Ram Sahib was also having this similar agenda with his social movement. What for social movement is for, or what for this political movement, if we do not get our economic share, if we do not get the economic improvement, economic development, because ultimately we are suffering from poverty. If the people, those who are suffering from poverty, they are having no education, no land, no house, nothing they have, then their life is not better than the slaves. That is why when the government in Uttar Pradesh was formed, primarily there is a gap between the educated class and the masses. Why generally the masses and primarily the masses, those who live in the rural areas, majority they particularly vote for BSP. There is a reason. And that reason is that BSP has focused under the leadership of Banji and Manevar Kanshi Ram on the economic emancipation of the poverty-ridden masses. They have given the land pattas. They have developed the Ambedkar Gram Vikas Yojana to develop the population where the scheduled caste population was in majority. So there were 11,500 villages basically developed as a model villages, where they were having the concrete roads, water, health, primary school, electricity, the pakka houses, and nearly 26,500 crores rupees were basically earmarked for in the first three government for the Ambedkar Gram Vikas, the planning. They have given the share in the market in the private sector, the PPP model. That is why there was a focus that who needs much. That's why economic agenda is not out of sight of this movement. However, in general public, it may not be visible, but it is very much the foundation cornerstone. Without developing society economically, without adding the financial add, without giving the share in the material and the physical resources, then the entire exercise is futile, the entire exercise is useless. That is why the schools, colleges were they built up. The Gautam Buddha University was built up in 515 acres. Within 4 years, there are many schools, colleges, roads, and the BSPs, under the BSP's government, the contractors were they given the contracts according to the size of population. That if they have to purchase, if they have to construct a road, if they have to construct a bridge, that is why it was basically the program of economic emancipation as well as the economic strengthening of a society. So I think it's only in the 1970s that Baba Saheb Ambedkar's focus on the economic issues, basically, they were thrown out of the mainstream politics. But whenever Kanshi Ram Saheb basically tried to bring such economic issues into the politics, and that BSP was silently was doing working on that. So I think our friend who has asked this question, that now there is also we generally do talk much about the fundamental rights, but hardly we do talk about the directive principles of the state policy. And the directive principles and the fundamental rights, there is an agenda of the social transformation, the fundamental rights, and fundamental rights are nothing without fulfilling the directive principles. You read article from 36 35 to 51, then how economic transformation can take place. Either read article 38 or 39 or 51 or 42 or 43, everything has been written. That is why the fundamental rights and the directive principles of state policy are the program of BSP, Bahujan Samaj Party. That is why Kanshi Ram Sahib used to say that why do not we have our election manifesto, because our election manifesto is constitution. Our election manifesto are fundamental rights. Our election manifesto are directive principle of the state policy. What else we can do out of that directive principle and the fundamental rights? What other parties generally do, they actually take certain pieces of some recent problems, and they try to manipulate the entire masses on the basis of that. That is why we must understand that everything has been written, and our agenda, our manifesto, our the economic planning, economic program, that has been written by Baba Saheb Ambedkar in the constitution, and we must focus on that. Over to you.
This is brilliant. This is a brilliant summary. You said Baba Saheb Ambedkar's economic plan was dropped in some year. You said 19 something. You said.
Yeah, 1970s. Actually, what happened? Baba Saheb was in favor of nationalization of industries and nationalization of agriculture.
Right.
It was actually the primary agenda, and nationalization of the agriculture and land was not possible without land reforms. So what Congress party did under the leadership of Indira Gandhi in 1970s, he brought poverty alleviation program. And what she did, basically she nationalized the banks, the private banks, but she did not nationalize heavy industries. She did not nationalize land and agriculture. Because it is the agriculture, Baba Saheb Ambedkar, why he was focusing on agricultural land. Actually, cultural land is an immovable asset. And it's not only an asset, basically, it is also an indicator of social status. If you are owning a land in a village, if you are the owner of a 50 acre or 100 acres of a land, then you also develop a social status. So Baba Saheb Ambedkar, ideas basically were made, they were thrown into the backdrop by making nationalization of bank, instead of asking, our people, basically those who were working that time, They were asking for a nationalization of land, but the government did not do the nationalization of land. Rather, it did the nationalization of banks. Similarly, in 1991, when the new economic policy was introduced in India, though America was interested in 1973 at the time of Indira Gandhi's government, but Indira Gandhi's government outrightly refused it. If you would like to have some more references, then there is a book written by Christopher Jeffallo, India's Silent Revolution, that he had given many references in that book. But in 1991, why the new economic policy was introduced? And rather, when we were opposing privatization, that time the government brought the privatization of government services, privatization of the PSUs, privatization of education, privatization of health. And what they were giving the argument that by privatizing, by privatization, they will create more jobs. They will maintain, the balance of, economic balance, the balance of imports and export. But nothing happened because after that, another book have been published. But there was an agenda because in 1980s, Kanshi Ram Saab had begun this movement of, the Bahujan movement, and he was asking to implement the Mandal Commission report. And in 1990, because of his movement in the Mandal Commission report was implemented on 7th August 1990, and the announcement was made by VP Singh in the parliament. So what the Congress and other Manuvadi parties thought that now under the force they have implemented this policy, but how to stop? So they started advertising the government jobs. And I have some statistic till 2002, nearly out of 1,000 PSUs, nearly 800 were basically either privatized or semi-privatized. They have been published in the economic surveys. You can see the economic surveys around 2002 and 3. So basically, there are many things which we need to understand how they are taking place. So again, now nobody is talking about land reform. Nobody is talking about nationalization of industries. Nobody is talking about the nationalization of agriculture. Nobody is talking about give industry status to the agriculture. Baba Sahib also had written in the.
No, but did Kanshi Ram had any program on these nationalizing aspects? Have you come across in your research?
Basically, as I told you now, that what happened because the reservation and the issue of land. There are many speeches of Kanshi Ram ji in parliament. That in 70s, Congress has given land pattas on paper, but they have not given the actual ownership. So what happened? He was saying that if land has been given on paper, then there must be actual ownership must be given. That is why when the first government of Bahujan Samaj Party was formed in 1995, for 6 months, for 4 months only, then he had this agenda on priority. That the pattas which were given in 1970s and 80s, the people must have their actual control, and the district magistrates were instructed. That is why he was having, as I told you, that agenda, this agenda of land, that our people must have the ownership of land. And why, that he talked about Baba Sahib had brought 2 programs. One he brought in 1930s, that was actually the separate electorate. But he lost separate electorate in 1930s because of, Gandhi's protest. But he brought another, the program in 1942, 43, when he was actually holding, the portfolios under Viceroy's Council. And that was the agenda, actually, that was the separate settlement. And what was, if you go into this details of separate settlement, what was separate settlement? Baba Sahib brought a plan before the British government that our people must be settled separately, and they must be given land, ownership of land. They must have their settlement. They must have the ownership of land, and the government land which is unutilized, that land must be utilized by the government. Similar program Kanshi Ram Saab was having, that if we have our government, then we can implement these programs. That is why it's not only the people are not aware about this. Why the people are so much opposing Bahujan Samaj Party? Because they know that what is their agenda to an extent. Even 5 lakh hectare land was given as pattas to the scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and other backward classes, landless, those who were landless. 5 lakh hectare land, government land was distributed.
I think we need a kind of a summary of economic programs implemented by the Bahujan Samaj Party. So many of that education, because usually the Bahujan Samaj Party or the BAMSEF organization is confined or understood as a socio-religious and political, and they don't seem to have that's the kind of perception that is put forward. But as you were explaining, it's not always used as an economic model, but it is done in a way that helps economic emancipation. But with the figures that even I was researching a few years ago about the economic programs, and I'd come across this number, especially in the uh, in the in the autobiography of Behenji, Mayawati. She gives various kinds of numbers, but I think somebody has to compile that number, especially the Ambedkar Gram Vikas Yojana, how many villages and what kind of help it did. And if you do that, then I think there is much more work.
Many
We'll take
PhDs,
huh?
there are many PhDs have been completed on the Ambedkar Gram Vikas Yojana.
Okay. Some
Yeah, they have summaries, they have data, they have collected data.
I think it will be good. And if anybody can comment on the economic program of the BSP and the Bahujan movement, I would love to consider it to publish in some media. So final question before we call it a closure by a scholar, Dipali Vige from Germany. She has asked, has Kanshiram Saab spoken or addressed issues concerning the D&T, ENT people, groups from the Bahujan community? If so, can you comment and also maybe provide references if you are aware of right now? Or you can provide later if you're not now.
Yeah, as you know that when Kanshi Ram Saab was actually started this movement, so his entire focus primarily was on scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and other backward classes and religious minorities. But there is also a question of anti and the many communities, particularly in Maharashtra and some other states where tribals are in majority. But this question primarily is related to, particularly the Maharashtra, because there are many lists in Maharashtra. So he was having a clear cut, the agenda that the communities which have been left outside the list, because when Babasaheb Ambedkar was involved in framing the list of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in 1930s, and particularly they came in the Government of India Act 1935. So many communities were left out of that list. So they must be given, because there was also a question in Uttar Pradesh. There were nearly 16 communities from other backward classes, and there was a issue to include them in the list of scheduled caste. Similarly, there is a case in Rajasthan, because there are many communities who started, demanding their ST status from OBC, and this issue was also in Maharashtra also. So he also try out the some leaders from such communities, because raising by himself everything was not good. So he had many experiment in Maharashtra also in late 90s, that their question must be addressed, but because he was not able to address this issue in Maharashtra Assembly, because he was not having his presence. But naturally, he was having the concern, he was having that this issue must be addressed. Around 2003, 2004, however, BSP was in particularly in the region of Vidarbha, was having good vote share, but that good vote share could not turn up into seats. We would have some members in the Maharashtra Assembly. I think that naturally that question could have been addressed properly. I think still that problem is there. Many times, whenever the election comes, this issue is being raised, but it has not been addressed properly. If there are many, then I'll share with you later on.
Great. Thank you so much to Professor Dr. Nethrapal Singh for his comment, his elaborate lecture, and educating us about the facets of how to study Kanshi Ram. We got a very good history lesson packed in a short lecture. I know some people have attended his cadre camp that lasts for 1 week, and some of them are here, and he could give us a very glimpse of it. And hopefully down the line, if some of you are interested to learn more about the Bahujan movement and caterizing the community, you should request Professor Nethrapal and his time and attention, and organize, especially the youth working in different sector. Maybe you're working in IT, maybe you're working in government, maybe you're working in medical school, whatever department, or maybe you're a student, you are having part of a union. Any facilities, any facets, any areas that you work in, that you operate in, should consider having a cadre camp at least for a couple of days, so you are totally educated about the situation. What we do, Baba Sahib makes a very interesting reference to especially Republican Party of India's manifesto, not manifesto, the blueprint he wrote in 1956. And he said there is a difference between propaganda and education. Propaganda only gives one side to speak about the positive. Education gives both sides. Then you can make your own decision assessment. That's a Buddhist thought that Baba Sahib and any enlightened person would have. So please consider, especially to our young friends, organize such camps, such trainings, so we are more aware about our history. And I tell you, cadre camp is a very solid foundation for your own personal growth and creating a confidence in your own personal life. And as we heard a trailer of today, the presentation that Dr. Nethrapal carries, there are many people like him. If he cannot attend, he may definitely recommend other people. And I think the next time, especially many times the youth ask me, what can I do? I think you could do one is try to attend or organize a cater camp, and that requires your commitment, and use your time, talent, treasure, and that desire. Let's get educated in this process. I would like to thank all the participants, the co-host of this event, Dr. Prashant Ingole, and all for joining. Stay tuned. We will have more speakers. If you have any recommendation, please come. Our aim is to learn more about Kanshi Ram's praxis, what he did at the time when Ambedkarism was threatened to be forgotten, to be assimilated and eventually annihilated. That Kanshi Ram like person comes and then gives it a very loud shape and creates a politics. And today, whatever we see in Indian politics is a Kanshi Ram's politics. The people will not take his name, but those are the issues and agenda that he created. And this is a massive achievement. The Brahminical parties like BJP, Congress, and communists are talking about the issues that Kanshi Ram and his organizations rallied and fought for. Thank you for joining, and take care. Jai Bhim.
Thank you, Javi.
Jai Bhim.